Questions to the Prime Minister. Mr. Simon Burns. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hope you will allow me to pay some brief tributes. Captain Richard Holloway of the Royal Engineers was tragically killed after being engaged by enemy fire in Afghanistan on the 23rd of December. He was a highly respected soldier, and our deepest sympathies and condolences should be with his parents, his brother and his girlfriend who he left behind. Mr. Speaker, our thoughts should also go to the victims of the US helicopter crash in Norfolk, about which details are still emerging. And Mr. Speaker, today I know that the sudden death this morning of Paul Goggins, MP for Wythenshawe and Sale East, would have shocked everyone across this House. He was a kind and a brilliant man who believed profoundly in public service. Paul cared deeply about the welfare of children and about the importance of social work, and he brought his own very clear experience to bear as an MP and as a minister. He did vital work as a Northern Ireland minister, playing a quiet but essential role in delivering the absolutely essential devolution of policing and justice powers in Northern Ireland, particularly at the Hillsborough Castle talks. He was liked and admired right across the House and always treated everyone, in whatever circumstances, always treated everyone with respect. He'll be greatly missed, and we send our condolences to his wife Wynne, to his children and to his family. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Mr. Simon Burns.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the House will want to be associated with the comments of my right honourable friend. Paul Goggins in particular was a good and decent man, and I know that he'll be sorely missed on all sides of the House. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the British Chambers of Commerce found that manufacturing exports and services were growing strongly. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this shows that despite more work that needs to be done, that it is crucial that the government sticks to its long-term economic plan?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for what he said and what he said about Paul Goggins as well. Look, it is a welcome report from the British Chamber of Commerce. There is still a lot more work to do. We've got to continue to get the deficit down. We've got to continue economic growth, keep getting more people into work. There shouldn't be 1 ounce of complacency. But the report did find that manufacturing balances are at an all-time high, exports are up and services are growing strongly. If we stick to this plan, we can see this country rise and our people rise with it too.
Mr. Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, I join the Prime Minister in paying tribute to Captain Richard Holloway of the Royal Engineers, who was killed in action in Afghanistan. His death just 2 days before Christmas is a reminder of the risks being taken on our behalf every day by members of our armed forces. He showed the utmost courage and bravery, and all our sympathies are with his family and friends. I also join the Prime Minister in sending condolences to the families of the victims of the US helicopter crash in Norfolk. Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to our friend and colleague Paul Goggins. He was one of the kindest, most decent people in this House, and he was someone of the deepest principle. It shone throughout his career: social worker, councillor, MP and minister. And it is a measure of the man and his ability that he earned the respect, trust and affection of all sides in Northern Ireland. The Labour Party has lost one of its own and one of its best. Our deepest condolences go to his wife Wynne, his children Matthew, Teresa and Dominic, and indeed to his whole family. Mr. Speaker, the whole country will be concerned about the price being paid by those in communities affected by the floods and storms. I pay tribute to the work of the emergency services. Can the Prime Minister update the House on the number of people affected and what action is being taken now to ensure areas that could be affected by further flooding have all the necessary support?
Well, first of all, can I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his very moving words about Paul Goggins and for what he said. In terms of flooding, it is an extremely difficult situation for those affected. We should remember that 7 people have lost their lives since this began. I think he's right to pay tribute to the emergency services, to the Environment Agency workers, to the flood wardens, and to the many neighbours and individuals who've shown great bravery and courage and spirit over the Christmas period at helping neighbours and friends. As it's an ongoing situation, let me bring the House up to date with the latest detail. There are currently 104 flood warnings in place across the whole of England and Wales. That actually means that more flooding is sadly expected and immediate action is required. There are also 186 flood alerts, meaning that even further flooding is possible beyond what we're expecting more rapidly. Although the weather has improved, the river levels and groundwater levels remain so high that this further flooding could come at relatively short notice. There are a number of particular concerns, including Dorset, Wiltshire, Hampshire, Somerset and Oxfordshire. Given these ongoing threats, which could last for several days to come, I would urge members of the public to keep following the advice of the emergency services and the Environment Agency in those areas at risk. At a national level, we've been coordinating this response via COBRA, and COBRA will continue to meet under the chairmanship of my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, until the threat has passed.
Mr. Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for that answer. I know he and the Environment Secretary will keep the House updated. He will recognise that some people felt the response at times was too slow. In particular, can you tell the House whether it's become clear why it took so long for some of the energy distribution companies to restore power to homes over the Christmas period, and what steps does he believe can be taken to ensure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. In all these circumstances, no matter how good the preparation, there are always lessons to learn. And I think there are lessons to learn on this occasion. On the positive side, the Environment Agency warning service worked better than it has in the past. The flood defences did protect up to 1 million homes over the December and Christmas period. But there are some negatives there, and we need to learn lessons. I think particularly some of the energy companies didn't have enough people over the holiday period for emergency response, and I saw that for myself in Kent. So we need to learn these lessons. My right honourable friend, the Minister for Government Policy, will be leading this exercise. The Energy Secretary is already looking at the levels of compensation and the preparedness and the speed of response from energy companies, but I would welcome from all members of all constituencies affected by flooding what they see on the ground about lessons that can be learned so that we can make sure preparedness is even better in a future occasion.
Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, given the scale of risk exposed by these floods and the expected impact of climate change, can the Prime Minister also commit to DEFRA providing a report to this House by the end of this month, giving a full assessment of the future capability of our flood defences and flood response agencies, and whether the investment plans that are in place are equal to the need for events of this kind?
I'm very happy to make that commitment. As he knows, in this current 4-year period, we're spending £2.3 billion compared with £2.1 billion in the previous period. The money is going into flood defences, and we saw, as I said, with the early December flooding action, about 800,000 homes protected by previous flood defence work, and over the Christmas period, a further 200,000 houses affected. But whenever there is flooding, it then makes sense to look again at the proposals that are in the programme for flood defence work and to see what more can be done. As well as the government money, we're keen to lever in more private sector and local authority money, which is now possible under the arrangements, but I'm happy to commit, as he says, for the Environment Secretary to come back and report to the House about the level of expenditure in the years going ahead.
Mr. Tobias Elwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to the Prime Minister's remarks on the recent flooding, would he join me in paying tribute to Bournemouth Borough Council, the Dorset Emergency Services, as well as local residents in dealing with 2 evacuations in my constituency, one of which is still ongoing due to the River Stour bursting its banks. Given the changing weather patterns we are experiencing, could I ask what more could be done in the long term towards improved river and sea defences?
Well, as my honourable friend knows, in Bournemouth and the Dorset area, we've had 290 homes flooded so far. I agree with him that the work of the emergency services, the work of the Environment Agency has been excellent. I think many local authorities, including my own local authority, have had very good plans, put them into place very competently, but not every local authority does as well, and there will be lessons to learn there. In terms of the Bournemouth and Poole area, the Bournemouth Beach Management Scheme of around £14 million is going to be invested over the next 5 years, and that should protect around 2,500 properties by 2018-2019. But I'd again be interested to hear from him about what more he thinks can be done.
Ms. Diane Abbott.
The Prime Minister will be aware that the majority of new housing benefit claimants are actually in work. He'll also be aware that private sector landlords are increasingly refusing to take tenants on benefit or actually evicting them. What does he say to hard-working families faced with losing their homes because of his housing benefit cuts?
Not legal.
We say to hard-working families is we're cutting your taxes. That in April this year, we're going to be lifting to £10,000 the amount of money that someone can earn before they start paying income tax. And I think that makes a big difference. For instance, someone on the minimum wage working a 40-hour week will see their tax bill come down by 2/3. But we do have to take action on the housing benefit bill. Housing benefit now accounts for £23 billion of government spending. When we came into office, there were some families in London who were getting housing benefit payments of £60,000, £70,000, £80,000. They shout how many. Frankly, one was too many, and that's why we've capped housing benefit.
George Hollingberry.
If the government decided to mitigate the scale of the cuts it plans for the next Parliament, can my right honourable friend tell me how I explain to the students in the Meon Valley doing PSHE why they should make every effort to spend within their means to avoid taking on debt, but it's quite all right for the government to ignore the same advice?
I think my honourable friend makes an important point. We have taken difficult decisions to get the deficit down, to get the country back on track, and that has meant difficult decisions in terms of departmental spending and also welfare. Now, the party opposite is now back to where it started. They are now saying they want to mitigate the level of cuts, and therefore they want to spend more, they want to borrow more, they want to tax more. We may be at the start of a new year, but they've gone completely back to where they were 3 years ago.
Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister recognise the concerns of families and communities about the impact of fixed odds betting terminals, gaming machines where people can gamble up to £300 a minute on our high streets?
No, I absolutely share concerns about this issue, and I think it's welcome that we're having this debate in the House of Commons today. I think there are problems in the betting and gaming industry, and we need to look at them. I think it's worth listening to the advice of his own shadow minister, who said that we should accept the argument that empirical evidence is needed before making any changes, because it might just create another problem somewhere else. But this is a problem. It does need looking at. We have a review underway. Frankly, we are clearing up a situation that was put in place under the last government. But I think if we work together, we can probably sort it out.
Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, let me say the 2005 Gambling Act limited the number of machines to 4 per betting shops, but it didn't go nearly far enough in the action that should have been taken. And let me just say, Mr. Speaker, he asked about evidence. Local communities from Fareham to Liverpool are saying that these machines are causing problems for families and communities. Now, local communities believe they already have the evidence. Shouldn't they be given the power to decide whether they want these machines or whether they don't want these machines?
I think he's making a reasonable point, but let me first of all just deal with the facts. Fixed odds betting terminals were introduced in 2001 after the Labour government relaxed gambling regulations. The second fact is there are actually now fewer of these machines now than there were when Labour were in office. And of course, to his point he's just made, councils already have powers to tackle the issue, and I believe that councils should make full use of that power. Now, I'm not arguing that is job done. There may well be more to do, but we have a review underway. This is an issue for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. If he has ideas, I'd ask him to put those ideas into this review. But as I say, he might want to listen to his own shadow minister, who as recently as November said there's no evidence to support a change to stakes and prizes for fixed odd betting terminals. So there does seem to be something of a change here, but if he's got extra evidence, put it into our review and I think we can sort it out.
Ed Miliband.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our ideas are in our motion today, and if he wants to vote for it, we'd be very happy for him to do so. Mr. Speaker, he says there are already powers in place. But the Mayor of London and the Conservative head of the Local Government Association have said local authorities do not have the power to limit the number of these machines. Now, 1 in 3 calls to the gambling helpline are about these machines, and they are clustered in deprived areas. For example, Mr. Speaker, there are 348 in one of the most deprived boroughs in the country, Newham. Can he at least give us a timetable for when the government will decide whether to act?
We will be reporting in the spring as a result of the review that is underway. And I think it is important we get to grips with this. There is something of a pattern, Mr. Speaker. We had the problem of 24-hour drinking, and that needed to be changed and mitigated, and we've done that. We have the problems created by the deregulation of betting and gaming, which he's raising today, and we need to sort that out. We've also had problems, of course, in the banking industry and elsewhere that we've sorted out. So, as I say, if he wants to, and if he, as I said, if he wants to input ideas into that review, I think that's the right way forward.
Miss Anne McIntosh.
May I pay tribute to Paul Goggins and say how much he'll be missed in this House? My right honourable friend is on the record of saying that he would very much like to see the A64 on the future roads list. Can he ensure that the present economy, which is very buoyant in North Yorkshire, is not held back by the congestion on that road and the poor safety? Will he join with me in ensuring that his future visits he can travel much faster and much greater safety on the A64?
Yes. No, I know the honourable lady is absolutely right to raise this issue. The quality and the capacity of the road system in Yorkshire has been and is a major issue. The government has taken some important steps to help, but I know there's more work to be done, and I know that the Chancellor was listening carefully to what she had to say, and I'm sure that we can look carefully at this for the future roads programme.
Katie Clark.
What plans does the government have to close the loophole which allows businesses to pay agency workers less than their fellow employees doing the same job?
Well, I looked into this loophole carefully over the Christmas period when the party opposite raised it, and I discovered two things about this loophole. The first is it was introduced and agreed by the last Labour government and the TUC. That is loophole fact number one. Loophole fact number two, he shouts CBI. Well, this is what the CBI had to say about it. They said further gold plating of EU rules can only cost jobs. Then we've got the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. They said this: these arrangements were agreed following consultation between the last Labour government, business and the unions. Is the Labour Party really saying they want to deny British temps the option of permanent employment? And then, of course, the IOD have added to that by saying this. It's very clear, Mr. Speaker, they want to know what we think about it. This is what the IOD think. It's a bad idea all round. The initial response to this from employers would be to employ fewer people on higher wages. What a great start to the new year. Let's come up with an idea to increase unemployment. Only Labour could come up with an idea like that.
Emmy Morden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is considerable interest from businesses in the maritime and marine sector wishing to relocate to Portsmouth to make use of its facilities and its skilled workforce. What can the government do to send a clear message to entrepreneurs that Portsmouth is open for business and facilitate businesses moving to and expanding there?
Well, I think my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this issue. I think there are two things specifically that we can do to help Portsmouth at this time. The first is the Portsmouth and Southampton City deal that we should put in place that will bring jobs and investment. And I think secondly is to emphasise the fact that this massive programme of modernising the Royal Navy with the aircraft carriers, the Type 45s, the future frigates, these are by and large going to be based in Portsmouth, creating jobs, making sure that it remains one of the most important homes for the Royal Navy. But she's absolutely right. Added to that, there is a future in Portsmouth in other marine industries and commercial and private sector industries, and we should do everything we can to encourage business to locate there.
Livy Abrahams.
I would also like to pay my sympathies to Paul Goggins' family, who is a lovely, lovely man. Mr. Speaker, the government has cut £1.8 billion from the social care budget, which means that nearly 500,000 fewer people are eligible for social care. With cuts in home care charges up £740 a year since 2010, and the government's care cap nothing more than a care con. Why isn't the Prime Minister being honest with older people about the real care costs they will face under this government?
Well, what I'd say to the honourable lady is, of course, difficult decisions have had to be taken right across government spending, but actually, if you look at health and social care, we protected the health budget, so it's going up in real terms, and we put some of that health budget, up to £3 billion, into social care to help local authorities. We now want to get local authorities and local health services working even more closely together to deal with the problems of block beds and making sure there are care packages for people when they leave hospital. In the areas of the country where this is working, you can really see the benefits, and we want to make that happen right across the country.
Gillen.
Mr. Speaker, our excellent local enterprise partnership estimates that Buckinghamshire has a £12 billion economy, with nearly 30,000 registered businesses and European head offices of over 700 foreign companies. And they need the security of long-term economic policies. Will the Prime Minister assure me that as our economic growth has so clearly returned, that unlike the party opposite, he will not gamble with their future and he will stick steadfastly to his long tried and tested economic policy?
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for what she says. There is a vibrant economy right across the Thames Valley, including in Buckinghamshire. That is going to be based on sticking to our long-term economic plan. I think particularly important for the sort of companies she mentions is keeping our rates of corporate tax low, so we attract businesses into the country and make sure companies want to headquarters here. That is the right answer, not the answer of the party opposite, which is to put up corporation tax and to put a close sign over the British economy.
Mr. Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Diolch. A year ago, the Prime Minister said he would make damn sure that foreign companies pay higher taxes. Yeah. But in the Financial Times on the weekend, it was shown that technology companies like Apple and eBay are paying even less. Yeah. Why isn't the Prime Minister's tough talk adding up to very much?
I think we are. I think he's being a little unfair. I think we are making progress on this very difficult issue because we raised at the G8 the importance of having international rules on tax reporting and having more countries working together on tax reporting, and huge progress has been made, not least in the European Union, where for the first time countries like Luxembourg and Austria that have always held out against this information exchange are now taking part, and the OECD work is going ahead apace, and that's partly because Britain has put its full efforts behind this vital work.
Mr. Tim Farron.
Mr. Speaker, Paul Goggins was a very decent and humble man, and in my experience, one of the most effective and fair ministers this House has seen. He will be very sadly missed. The Prime Minister will know that the science is clear that the extreme weather conditions affecting our communities, including around the Kent Estuary in Westmoreland, are a destructive and inevitable consequence, at least in part, of climate change. Now, given that he has said that this should be the greenest government ever, will he now agree to support carbon reduction targets so that we can take real action to protect people and property?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend that we are seeing more abnormal weather events. Now, colleagues across the House can argue about whether that is linked to climate change or not. I very much suspect that it is. But the point is, whatever one's view, it makes sense to invest in flood defences, it makes sense to invest in mitigation, it makes sense to get information out better, and we should do all of those things. As for carbon reduction targets, this government is committed to carbon reduction targets. We worked with the last government to put the Carbon Act into place. It wouldn't have happened without our support. We also have the Green Investment Bank up and running in Edinburgh and going to be investing billions of pounds in important green projects.
John Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Government cuts having closed the police cells in Bassetlaw. I now discover that the police are having to patrol villages using public transport. Which begs a question I'd like to ask the Prime Minister. If the police are waiting at a bus stop, having arrested someone, should they go upstairs, should they go downstairs, or should they not arrest at all?
The first thing to say to the honourable gentleman is he didn't mention that recorded crime in the Bassetlaw Community Safety Partnership is down by 27% under this government. But what is so noticeable? 27%. 27%. But what is very noticeable is that every honourable member opposite is getting up and complaining about the need to make reductions in departmental spending. Frankly, this is like Back to the Future, Mr. Speaker. We are back now to where we were 3 years ago when we said you've got to make difficult decisions, you've got to make some cuts, you've got to get the deficit down, and they lived in total denial. They are back to where they were 3 years ago. It may be the new year, it's the same old Labour Party.
Ian Stewart. The royal pardon granted to Alan Turing 2 weeks ago has finally seen justice for this national hero. May I thank the Prime Minister, the Justice Secretary, and everyone over the years who has paved the way to bring this about. And may I invite my right honourable friend to visit Bletchley Park in my constituency and see for himself Alan Turing's remarkable achievement.
Now, I absolutely back what my honourable friend has said. I think that it is excellent news that this royal prerogative mercy, which is very rarely granted, has been granted in this very special case. I'd be delighted to come and visit his constituency, to go to Bletchley Park. One of my wife's family worked there during the war and speaks incredibly highly about what Alan Turing was like and what he was like to work with. And there's no doubt, the historians can argue about the degree, but there's absolutely no doubt the work that was done in his constituency was absolutely vital in winning the war.
Paul Bromfield. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before Christmas, I was contacted by a seriously ill constituent of mine who's waiting for a kidney transplant. He needs 5-hour dialysis sessions 3 times a week. But in the Prime Minister's Britain, he's been told by the Job Centre that he's fit for work. On Monday, the Chancellor promised to take £12 billion more from the welfare budget. Will the Prime Minister guarantee there will be no further cuts to benefits for the sick and disabled?
Well, first of all, what I'd say on the specific issue of his constituent, if he wants to write to me with the individual case, I'm very happy to look at that individual case. In terms of making sure dialysis machines are available and the expertise is available, we are putting more money into the NHS, even though the advice from the Labour Party was to cut. And the reason we've been able to put more money into the health service is we've taken tough and difficult decisions about welfare. Because we put a cap on the amount of money a family can get, we've been able to invest in our health service. Because we put a cap on a housing benefit, not giving £60,000, £70,000 to some families, we've invested in our health service. We want to see more dignity, more security, more stability in the lives of Britain's families, and we're making choices consistent with that.
Mr. Dan Biles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Soaring car sales back to pre-crisis levels have helped supply chain companies like Certec in Coleshill in my constituency create manufacturing jobs. 200 in the last year, another 400 planned. Does the Prime Minister agree that this shows that we are successfully rebalancing the economy and that we need to stay the course with policies that are clearly working?
Very grateful for my honourable friend and what he says. I went with him to the opening of the new Ocado warehouse in his constituency, which has generated hundreds of jobs and, as he says, is going to be vital for the supply chain in his constituency. What these businesses want to see is a consistent economic policy, keeping interest rates down, getting the deficit down, cutting taxes for hard-working people, helping businesses to take more people on, investing in education, in skills, and in controlling welfare. Those are the elements of our long-term plan, and that is what we will stick to.
Tom Blenkinsop.
2 months ago, I asked the Prime Minister whether Tory councillor Abdul Aziz, who was suspended by the Labour Party, should return to Pakistan given the arrest warrant for him in connection to a brutal killing. Councillor Aziz attended the Prime Minister's party in October as an invited guest. So why is the Prime Minister still hiding on whether he thinks Councillor Aziz should return to face justice?
Well, I'll make 2 points to the honourable gentleman, and I've written to him this morning. The first is this. I think it'll be interesting to hear. The first is this. The allegations he mentions are disputed and are currently subject to legal action, so I'm limited in what I can say. But what he failed to mention to the House last time he raised this is that the allegations date from the time when he was a Labour councillor. And I'm informed, Mr. Speaker, that during his time as a Labour councillor, the Labour Party did absolutely nothing about these allegations. So perhaps next time when he stands up and asks a question in the House of Commons, he'll give us the full facts.
Mr. Robert Buckland. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the tributes to Paul Goggins? His work on the reform of the law of child neglect will go on. Mr. Speaker, last year my constituent, 23-year-old Christopher Scott, died as a result of taking a so-called legal high called AMT. Will my right honourable friend support my calls from the coroner and calls from Christopher's family to make sure that this dangerous drug and others like it are outlawed?
No, well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this issue. And first of all, can I offer my condolences to the family of my honourable friend's constituent. As he knows, with the rules that we have, hundreds of legal highs have already been banned, and our temporary drug orders allow us to outlaw substances within days of them coming on the market. But we're not complacent, and we've asked the Advisory Council for the Misuse of Drugs to renew our definitions of controlled drugs to ensure we capture these newly emerging substances when there's evidence of harm. So there is more work to be done here, but I know my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, is absolutely on it.
Nigel Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, may I join the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in paying warm tribute to Paul Goggins. He was a fine, decent and honourable man who was a great friend to Northern Ireland and a great friend to all of its people, and he will be sadly missed, not only in this House but throughout Northern Ireland, and we offer sincere condolences to his wife and family at this difficult time. May I also commend the Prime Minister and welcome the fact that he has committed to the triple lock guarantee for pensioners if he's returned as Prime Minister in the next Parliament. And can I therefore ask him to clarify whether, if he is elected as Prime Minister again in 2015 and in the next Parliament, he will commit to retaining the winter fuel allowance in its current eligibility thresholds and as a universal benefit?
Well, first of all, can I thank him for what he says about Paul Goggins. On the issue of pensions, I think it's important to recognise we're only able to make this commitment to the triple lock, which has been important in this Parliament because we've made a commitment to raise the pension age to 66 and then progressively 67 and so on. That means that this pension increase is affordable. We made a very clear pledge for this Parliament about the pensioner benefits, and I'm proud of the fact that we are fulfilling it. We will set out our plans in the next manifesto. But what I would caution people about is the belief that somehow if you don't pay, for instance, winter fuel allowance or the other benefits, if you don't pay them to those, for instance, paying tax at 40p, you save a very small amount of money. So yes, of course, we'll set out our plans in the manifesto, but absolutely vital is saying to Britain's pensioners, you have worked hard, you have done the right thing, we want to give you dignity and security in old age, and the triple lock makes that possible.
Sir Alan Beath.
Mr. Speaker, is my right honourable friend aware that at Thrunton in my constituency there's been a large fire of waste carpets burning since September the 3rd last year, and that the residents locally have been suffering from the fumes and smoke from what we now know may be hazardous waste, and that the fire brigade can't put out the fire for fear of polluting the water supply? Can I have my right honourable friend's support in urging the Environment Agency and the local authority to get this material off the site and give residents their lives back?
Yeah. Well, I will certainly look in even more detail to the issue that he raises. I understand the concern it's causing my right honourable friend and his constituents. My understanding is that environmental concerns, in particular that waste might run off and pollute local water supplies, these have hampered the efforts to extinguish the fire. I understand the local recovery group is meeting later this week to see what more can be done to remove this waste, and I'm happy to intervene with him on his behalf to make sure this makes progress.
Angus Robertson.
The Prime Minister's anti-independence campaign launched an initiative this week encouraging people outside Scotland to take part in the debate. Given that initiative, why will the Prime Minister not debate the First Minister on television?
The calls for this debate show a mounting frustration amongst those calling for Scotland's separation from the rest of the United Kingdom because, Mr. Speaker, they know they're losing the argument. They're losing the argument about jobs, they're losing the argument about investment, they've completely lost the argument about the future of the pound sterling, they're losing the argument about Europe. And yes, of course there should be a debate, but it's a debate between people in Scotland. The leader of the in campaign should debate the leader of the out campaign. Now, of course, he, as the lackey of Alex Salmond, wants to change the terms of the debate, but I'm not falling for that one.
Mr. James Clapperson.
In the 13 years before 2010, there was net migration of nearly 4 million people into the UK, mostly into England, and in many cases as a result of work permits issued by the then government. Will my right honourable friend give me an assurance that this government will keep in place its cap on the number of workers from outside the European Union and encourage employers to give a chance to talented young people here?
No, I can give my honourable friend the assurance he seeks. We should keep the cap on economic migrants from outside the European Union. We should continue with all the action we're taking to make sure that people who come here are coming to work and not to claim. But I think what we need to do next is to recognise that the best immigration policy is not only to have strong border controls, but also to have an education approach which is educating our young people for jobs in our country and a welfare system that encourages them to take those jobs. It is three sides to this argument. It's about immigration, education and welfare, and this government has a plan for all three.
At least Ian Davidson.
Could I agree with the Prime Minister? That it is...
The tag team.
Thank you.
Tag team.
That it is genuinely absurd that the leader of the No campaign in Scotland cannot get a debate with the leader of the Yes campaign in Scotland, and that the leader of the Yes campaign in Scotland demands a debate with somebody that doesn't have a vote. In these circumstances, does the Prime Minister agree with me that in politics, as in shipbuilding, empty vessels make the most noise? I'm not finished. There is more. Without seeking to give offence to the Prime Minister,
why not?
Could I tell him that the last person Scots who support the No campaign want to have as their representative is a Tory toff from the home counties, even one with a fine haircut.
I accept every part of the honourable gentleman's question. I well remember when he came to question time, not with an empty vessel, but with a model of the vessel that he wanted built so near to his constituency, and I'm proud that this government is building that vessel and indeed another one like it. I also humbly accept that while I'm sure there are many people in Scotland who'd like to hear me talk about this issue, my appeal doesn't stretch to every single part. But the key point he's making is absolutely right. The reason the Yes campaign head and the No campaign head can't seem to get a debate is because those who want to break up the United Kingdom, they know they're losing the argument, so they want to change the question. It's the oldest trick in the book, and we can all see it coming.
Order.